We answer your mailbag questions next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. On Location is the official hospitality partner of the NFL. It's the only place to score a once-in-a-lifetime Super Bowl ticket and experience package. Visit On Location, exp.com/SB56 for more information or search Super Bowl On Location. And we return here. It is a midweek edition of Locked On Ravens. Coming here again after the Ravens fall to the Pittsburgh Steelers in painful fashion, 20-19 on a failed 2-point attempt. John Harbaugh attempting to win the game. And look, it just didn't go in their favor. The ball didn't bounce their way, or I guess bounced off of Mark Andrews' fingers the wrong way. And so the Ravens now 8-4. It's unfortunate. It's a game that, they really probably should have won, but they made too many mistakes. And here they are now, still atop the AFC North, but no longer atop the entire AFC Conference. And here today, we're going to be answering your mailbag questions, 3 full segments of mailbag questions today. I am very appreciative of everybody who asks mailbag questions and who, gives me content to talk about. I love answering these questions. I love giving my opinions out about what people have to ask because I think it's really important to do all that. So we're going to talk just mailbag, all 3 segments here. Let's dive into it. Before we do that, though, be sure to follow us anywhere you get your podcasts. So whether that's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify in audio form or in video form on YouTube. If you are here on YouTube with me and you see my face in my background, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. It really helps out with the YouTube algorithm and getting this in front of more people so we can have more conversations about this Baltimore Ravens team. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter at ChaosStriker34 and the Locked On Ravens Twitter account at Locked On Ravens for episode updates. So with all that being said, we're going to dive into the content here. We'll start off with our mailbag questions and start off with Eric Clark, who asks, assume you can get Lamar Jackson to improve in one thing in the offseason, 2K training camp. What would you choose? Throwing with anticipation, back shoulder throws, reading pre-snap, throwing the ball away, throwing more jump balls, release speed, snap to throw. So, yeah, Eric lists out a bunch of different things here that Lamar Jackson has shown potential with, but really isn't there yet and does have to improve upon it. I mean, if we're talking right now, and I'm judging my theory and what I'm putting him in for training camp with based off of what he's done right now, I think it just has to be overall decision-making without holding the football for too long, is understanding situations. Because, I think that if he can understand that, hey, look, if he can say, look, I am a player who can do so much with the football in my hands, and he recognizes that, obviously he does, he understands it, but sometimes the better play is to live to see another down, and he throws the football away on a 2nd and 13 instead of throwing an interception, or on a 3rd and long instead of throwing an interception like we saw in week 13. It can literally save the Ravens points. Just living to see another down is so important. So whether that is just reading the play pre-snap, and if guys are up at the line for blitzing, saying, all right, how many guys are going to come? How many guys are going to drop back? That's all really important. There are areas Jackson has to improve upon this stretch. It's been about a month. We've seen that, yeah, there's some stuff he has to improve upon. But at the end of the day, he is going to attack this offseason. I think, again, he's improved every single season. We've seen improvements in areas from him, but it doesn't all just magically come together. But with a player like Lamar Jackson, who has shown that greatness, people don't have as much patience for mistakes because they've seen the greatness before. So when they see those mistakes, they see it as regression, and they're like, oh my God. And some of it has been regression, right? I mean, we've seen Jackson just be a bit, I think, under pressure this year. He's, I think, stressing a little bit. So I think if he can get back to that, hey, mistake-free football, let's play a bunch here. Let's just play my game. I think that'll be what'll be the best thing for him, because he cut down on his turnovers. In his rookie season, if you remember, his fumbles were out of control, but he cleaned up on it. He didn't really have a ton of turnover issues. in his second season, in his third season, but it's kind of crept back. So that decision making that leads to turnovers, I think, is the one area that I would say, hey, Lamar, let's go improve upon that so you can come into next year and just be an overall better quarterback, and that will give you overall confidence to go out there and make the throws you need, because you're not going to be as worried about, hey, if I throw this ball up, is it going to be a turnover? Because he understands, hey, let's throw the ball away, let's get to another down, and let's try to score some points on the next down, instead of I'm going to run around for 15 seconds and 4 out of 10 times it works. The other 6 out of 10, it's a sack or a turnover. I think that's really important to understand for sure. Our next question here comes from Mark Strawn, and he asks, any update on Juwan James? So he can play this year. Would he be right tackle, which would push Phillips back to guard? And so, yeah, the Juwan James situation, one that many people want to know about. And I mean, rightfully so, right? He's a player that I think, if he can come back this year, can make a huge impact for them. There hasn't been a concrete update, since that is in the question. There hasn't been a concrete update on James. My personal opinion, I don't think he's going to play this year. I think that, so he tore his Achilles, and that's a pretty serious injury. Now, people recover from it in different ways and in different time frames. But the Ravens need tackle depth. James would certainly help that. But I don't see him coming back this season, because maybe they don't want to rush him back. John Harbaugh had said, sometime around December, maybe he surprises me and comes back, and I'm wrong about it. I hope I am wrong. I want to see him on the field and healthy for this Ravens team. If he was able to play, assuming the hand injury to Patrick McCary is season ending, and it hasn't been announced as that at all. It could just be a multiple week thing and, not season ending whatsoever. I hope that's the case. James would be the right tackle, and then that would push Phillips into guard. But if McCary is healthy, then you have, all right, are you pushing McCary to guard? I don't think you want to do that, because he's actually been playing decent at right tackle. So I think James would be the backup in that situation. I think his time is next year. The Ravens do have him under contract for 2 years. He's making not a ton of money this year, a lot more money next year. So if they just want to say, look, we don't want to rush you back from this, we want to make sure you're 100% healthy because we think you can contribute on the field in 2022, then I think they're just going to say, look, just take this year off and we'll get back at it next year. So that's where I am with James. I don't necessarily think he's going to play this year. Hopefully, if he's able to do it, he will. And I hope that is the case. But right now, I don't have the feeling that he'll come back this season, although it would be a big help with the Ravens and their injuries this year. Our next question from Jay Brock here. And he asks, with the numerous similar injuries this year, it's safe to say the Ravens have to look at strength and conditioning, specifically Saunders, who has been in charge for the last 5 years, where corners can't stay healthy. And the reason for the COVID outbreak last year, Judon started the call for firing. And actually, I think the call for firing actually came last year with the COVID thing. And so the whole thing that Jay Brock was referring to there is after Deshaun Elliott's season-ending injury in Week 9 against the Vikings, Matthew Judon tweeted out, fire Steve Saunders, and Deshaun Elliott actually liked that tweet. So what it means, I'm not going to speculate too much, but there have been plenty of people unhappy with the injury situation in Baltimore over the past few years. Now, I will say in 2019, they were actually relatively healthy. They really only lost Pernell McPhee and Tavon Young for the season. They had a couple injuries late in the year, like Mark Ingram, and Mark Andrews had a thing as well. But it hasn't been what it's been. 2020, they had a couple as well. I mean, obviously you had Nick Boyle and Ronnie Stanley and a couple other guys, Tavon Young. But this year, it's been astronomical. The Ravens are the most injured team in the league. I don't care who has more players on injury reserve right now. Talent-wise, the Ravens have lost the most by far. And look, for teams like the Titans, A.J. Brown is probably coming back at some point. Derrick Henry is probably coming back at some point. Now, that's not confirmed, but, it seems like they're indicating that in some situations. The Ravens, they're not getting guys back at this point anymore, right? Marcus Peters isn't walking through that door. J.K. Dobbins isn't walking through that door, right? You're not getting Gus Edwards in next week or in the next 3 weeks. All those guys are done. Marlon Humphrey, he's done. So the Ravens have been the most injured team this season. And look, football happens, injuries happen, but to an extent like this, where is the problem? And there have been a multitude of opinions on just where it is. Is it strength and conditioning? Is it the field conditions? Is it just the physical football they play? Do you just chalk it up to football? There are a lot. But look, I'd be shocked if the team didn't at least look into, not necessarily firing Saunders, but looking into it and saying, where do we have to improve? Because every year the cornerback room is decimated to a pulp. They come into the year every year. I've said this so many times on this show. They come in, and it just seems like it's their deepest position. And then by the end of the year, they're reduced to nothing because of injuries. So they do have to solve the issue, because while injuries happen in football, that is absolutely accurate. And there's not going to be a team who gets through the entire year healthy to an extent like this, and to kind of have it happen as often as the Ravens have had it happen over the past couple of seasons, with a couple outliers, of course. Is it Saunders? Is it somebody else? I'm not entirely sure. But I think the team will probably want to look at it and say, what is going on? Why is this happening? So obviously, the COVID situation doesn't really help things, but they're going to do what they feel is best for this team. Hopefully, they are able to solve the issue, whether it is with a firing or whether it is with, re-sodding their field or whatever. But the field has been a talking point this year. Saunders has been a talking point this year. The injuries has been a talking point this year. So, I can only hope that they figure it out and maybe look into it a bit as the offseason comes to fruition. Finally, here we're going to look at a question from Rick, and he asks, how do we get the offense started up again, and how do we mask this horrible offensive line? And so, yes, the Ravens offense has certainly struggled over the past 4 weeks, and it's no secret. This team has scored 5 total touchdowns over the last 4 games. It's not going to cut it in the NFL. Even if your defense is playing kind of pretty good like the Ravens have been, you got to score more points. A Lamar Jackson offense, it's so rare to see a Lamar Jackson offense struggle so much. It does come down to the trenches, though, in the offensive line, in my opinion. It's just, it's been inconsistent. There have been great stretches. There have been really poor stretches. And it's not going to be what it should be because Ronnie Stanley's been out. And you just got to look at it that way and say, they're dealing with what they're dealing with. Kind of like with the running backs, where it's like, you hope that these guys can get it going, but this isn't J.K. Dobbins, like I said, we're talking through that door. They're just not there this year. So I think it starts up front. Ben Powers hasn't played great. I think they could be considering a guard change at some point, whether it's as early as this week or a couple weeks down the line. I think Ben Cleveland getting put in there would be great. But now you have Tyree Phillips working at tackle because of the injury to Pesha McCurry. So, what do you do? Alejandro Villanueva's your left tackle right now. You got Bradley Bozeman, Kevin Zeitler as that center right guard pair. There have been some penalties that have been costly. It's a matter of not killing momentum, though. The Ravens have been so close so many times early in this game to get off to fast starts, and they feed off of their own momentum very well. And it goes both ways. When they have the momentum, they are able to do a lot of things. When they don't have it and it's going against them, they kind of collapse in a lot of situations and just don't play football. So if they can nullify those penalties early in the game, if there's not a holding call on a first down that puts you back 10 yards and all of a sudden you got a punt instead of score a touchdown, they can do a lot of good things. So I'm really highlighting getting off the fast starts, getting guys going, and making sure they have the momentum early instead of having to build it late. And by that point, either it's too late or you're eking out a really close win just by taking it down to the wire. So I think, again, it does start up front. It also starts with the fast starts, and that's where I start for this Baltimore Ravens offense. We'll head into our first break, though. When we get back, we'll be diving into more mailbag questions. So stay tuned for that, and we'll be right back. Super Bowl 56 at SoFi is less than 100 days away, and On Location, the official hospitality partner of the NFL, is the only place to score a once-in-a-lifetime Super Bowl ticket and experience package. Select your exact season, choose from elite experiences featuring an exclusive pregame celebration with NFL legends, 5-star LA hotels, and food by the great Wolfgang Puck. Visit onlocationexp.com/Super Bowl 56 for more information, or search Super Bowl On Location. That's onlocationexp.com/Super Bowl 56, or search Super Bowl On Location. BetOnline is you covered all season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football season continues to march to the playoffs. BetOnline remains the number one spot for all the sports action this season. Head to our new updated desktop or mobile website 2 times a day and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. We return here. It's our second segment of this mailbag edition of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostreicher, your host, still hanging out with you here. And we're now going to dive into a full segment of just questions from one person. And that is someone who's been very involved in my mailbags recently, Positive Vibes 0611. I appreciate all the questions here. And he actually says, should I keep going with questions or you can just pick? Thank you for allowing me to share. And thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. And for anybody who wants to ask me multiple questions, I am all ears, and I am willing to answer anything. Now, if you ask me 80 million questions, I'll probably have to pick and choose from a couple to answer. But 4 questions here from Positive Vibes, I think I can make that happen in one segment. So let's start it off here with one. Do you think Lamar doesn't trust the offense? He called it out by saying we start slow. Is Lamar holding out for an offensive coordinator? Does he not want to chain himself to Roman? And so This is an interesting point because I think when looking at Greg Roman, the big question for me, because people are just saying, get rid of him, it's over, he's the issue. I look at it a bit more in depth than that, and I say, sure, he might have some flaws, but is the real issue the Ravens have outgrown his offense? And have the Ravens reached their ceiling with Greg Roman as the offensive coordinator, where they have learned a lot from his offenses, what works, what doesn't work, but maybe they've also learned what they need. And at this point, it's not saying, look, Greg Roman's a terrible offensive coordinator, because, look, it's not. I know that might upset some people, but he's not. He has definite flaws, though. And look, if Lamar Jackson's not bought into this offense, you have to make a move. And that move is not moving off of Lamar Jackson, it's moving off of the offensive coordinator. Because if Lamar Jackson is thinking to himself, look, I could do so many more great things with a better offensive coordinator, and this guy's holding me back. You're not trading the MVP of the league a couple years ago. You're moving off of the offensive coordinator. And the Ravens, a big thing with them has been lack of continuity at offensive coordinator. I go back to the Joe Flacco era, and I could list off many names: Jim Caldwell, Cam Cameron, Mark Trestman, Gary Kubiak, Marty Morningweg. The list, it goes on, it goes back. So I think some of their thinking with Lamar Jackson is we don't want to put him through what Joe Flacco went through in that regard. And through his first 2 seasons, he already had 2 different offensive coordinators. He had Marty Morningweg towards the end of his rookie year in 2018. Then he had Greg Roman starting off in 2019, and Greg Roman's been the offensive coordinator ever since. I don't necessarily think it's Lamar Jackson not trusting the offense, but I do think that they have a decision to make, especially because we had talked earlier in the season, or even before the year started, about, look, if there's a scapegoat on this team and they're like, look, the blame goes on someone, it has to go on someone, it's going to be Greg Roman on the offensive side of the ball. It's just going to be. And I said, if the offense has a stretch of games where they really struggle, they're not able to win games, then I think that's the call that Greg Roman will probably get to say, hey, look, we just can't move forward with you at this point. Now, this is that stretch, right? The Ravens have not played offensive football over the past month, really. It's been very minimal that they've made good things happen. The thing I'm saying, maybe they don't fire him, is because they've won 2 of those games. They're 2-2 in this month stretch. The other issue, though, is that you can't win points every week putting up 14, 20 points, whatever in that threshold it is. You got to score more than that, especially with the talent they have this year. Yes, there's no J.K. Dobbins. There's no Gus Edwards. There's no Ronnie Stanley. Nick Boyle's been in and out. But you have Lamar Jackson. You have Marquise Brown, Mark Andrews, Rashad Bateman, Sammy Watkins, all these guys. You have to figure it out. You have to figure out how to score more points on offense. So I think that's where my thought process is there. I don't, he's not, Lamar Jackson's not going to sabotage anything and say, oh, I'm not going to play good football, so Greg Roman gets fired. I'm not going to chain myself to him. I don't think that's it, but there could be a change. I don't know if it's going to happen, if it's not going to happen, but I think that they might say, look, we have to figure it out. How are we going to figure it out? Maybe we have to move on because the Ravens have just outgrown it at this point. We'll see what ends up happening. Next question here from Positive Vibes 0611. Is it play calling that doesn't include Bateman, Duvernay, and Sammy, or does Lamar just only look at Mark and Hollywood? And so this was a recurring theme for Jackson in the past couple of seasons, right? We had talked on this show last year, 2 years ago, about how Lamar Jackson, every week, it would be the either Mark Andrews or Marquise Brown show. The defense would take away one of them, the other would have a big game or something like that. This year it's a bit different, though, because you do have guys like Rashad Bateman, Sammy Watkins, Devin Duvernay. And over the course of Rashad Bateman's first couple of games, he was getting a huge target share from Lamar Jackson. 6 targets, 8 targets, 8 targets. But the last couple of weeks, Bateman's only had 5 targets over the last 2 games, 1 against the Steelers. I don't think it's play calling only. I don't think it's execution only. And I know I come back to that a lot, but I think that with the way that teams have been trying to force Lamar Jackson to throw the football early, he's just not reading the field as well as he was earlier in the season. He's under pressure. He's trying to do too much with the football. Guys are getting open, and not just Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews, but Lamar Jackson has a safety blanket in Mark Andrews that he trusts. He has a safety blanket in Marquise Brown that he trusts. So under pressure, he's probably going to go to the guys he trusts, and that's Mark Andrews, and that's Marquise Brown. Lamar Jackson has thrown, I think the stat is 6 interceptions when targeting Mark Andrews this season. That could be wrong, but it's a high number when targeting Mark Andrews because he's under pressure. He sees his security blanket. He's like, all right, I know I have a throw here that my guy can go and make, even if it's a little off. And then it's either way off or there's a miscommunication, and it just doesn't work that way. So Lamar Jackson, I was impressed with his target distribution over the course of the year outside of, I think, these last couple weeks, because he was getting everybody involved. It was, Mark Andrews, Rashad Bateman, Marquise Brown, Duvernay getting a lot of targets, but it hasn't really been that way over the past couple of weeks. So hopefully he can get back to that. The play calling, you do have to work some guys open, trying to get guys involved, but John Harbaugh did talk about it, and he said, look, if you do that, you start chasing numbers and they don't want to do it. So it's a matter of, Bateman getting open, Lamar Jackson seeing him, maybe having some play calls for him, but they're not going to necessarily say, all right, we're getting Rashad Bateman 10 targets this game and there's nothing you can do to change my mind. That's not what's going to happen with this offense. Next here, another one from Positive Vibes 0611. Can we finally say we've overachieved all year and this is who we really are? Injuries plus Roman equals this mess. And yeah, the injuries have been rough this year. Coming into this year, there were such high expectations about what this team could do, really about where they could go. And what you have now is a team that's just decimated on all fronts: running backs, offensive line, defensive line, corners, safeties. I mean, it's unbelievable. The talent they've lost, what they've done. I give a lot of credit to John Harbaugh, a lot of credit to the players, the coaching staff, whoever, for making this year what it's been so far. 8-4. If I had told you at this point, if I had listed out every single injury this year and say, hey, the Ravens are 8-4 at the top of the AFC North, 99% of people listening would not have believed me. And that's, I think, really impressive. But there is a reality here of this Ravens team has had their ceiling severely capped by injuries, as does every NFL team when they have injuries. This isn't just a Ravens thing. I'm not saying the Ravens are, they're so bad. No, I'm not saying that. They can certainly make some noise. But, is the running game better with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, or Devonta Freeman and Latavius Murray? It's Dobbins and Edwards. The ceiling is capped without those players. It's capped without Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters, without Ronnie Stanley, without O.J. Fort, Derek Wolfe, all these players. The Ravens still have potential to win some games, get to the playoffs, go a little far here, but it's going to be extremely difficult for them. It will be. There's no sugarcoating it. The Ravens could lose more games than they win over these past 5 games, or these next 5 games, because it's just what it is. They're running out of cornerbacks at a rapid rate. They are relying now on Anthony Averett to be their number 1. Jimmy Smith, who's injured a lot, to be number 2, and Tavon Young to be their slot. Safety, they're relying on a rookie and Brandon Stevens. Running back, they're relying on some veterans who have lost a bit of speed since they were in their prime. So there are issues. There are tons of injury issues. I don't think this is what the team is, but the tune on this team, I think, would be a lot different if the Ravens had hit on that 2-point conversion, right? I just think, look, they're 9-3 at the top of the AFC still with these injuries. John Harbaugh's a genius, right? All those things would have come out if the Ravens had hit that 2-point conversion. The fact that they didn't, and the ball bounced off of Mark Andrews and his fingers, all it is now is the Ravens are done. The Ravens, they're not making the playoffs. They're losing every game. That's a lot of what I've been hearing. Now, I know people aren't on that bandwagon, but there are people who are. And look, I understand that this team, they might not win the Super Bowl this year. It's highly unlikely, probably. But there is a chance. There is a shot. They have put themselves in a situation to make the playoffs based off their early season record. Even if they lose the majority of their games, they still have put themselves in a position. And once you hit January, it's a whole new ball game, a whole new season. So I don't think this is what the Ravens are, necessarily. I don't think they've necessarily said, hey, look, we're done this year. We did what we could and we're done. They have overachieved for sure. Absolutely they have. They have overachieved, but it's a good way. It's in a good way they've overachieved, and I think that they can still do it, but it's going to be really hard. I mean, it's not going to be sunshine and rainbows. There are going to be plenty of mistakes. If they can't get off to fast starts, if they can't necessarily limit those big plays, untimely penalties, it'll be tough, but maybe they can string out a couple wins here and suppress some people, as they've done time and time again this year. And positive vibes here. Final question here. What is the biggest reason for only scoring 4 touchdowns in a month? And so, yeah, the Ravens offense, again, has not scored a lot over these past few games. And part of it, I think, has to do with the overall stagnation. Is that a word? I'm going to say it's a word for now, but just how stagnant this team has been on offense and not getting off the fast starts. That's what I keep coming back to, because the momentum is everything. If the Ravens go into a half up, it's so much different than going up, whatever it is. If they score 10 points, 14 points, 16 points, that's different than going into the half up 6-3 or 3-0, because you're struggling there. The offensive line is just banged up, inconsistent. The talent level isn't necessarily what you want it to be at right now. The main reason, though, is because teams are forcing Lamar Jackson to get rid of the ball early. He is not adjusting. The offensive line is not adjusting. Greg Roman is not adjusting. Right? Greg Roman said, hey, look, we got everything figured out. We got our adjustments for it after the Miami game. And I had said, look, if he has it, then awesome, but I want to see it. And we haven't seen it. We haven't seen it. So I feel like we need to see it, first of all. But second of all, it's not just on one person again. Lamar Jackson has struggled against the blitz, but it is the job of the coaching staff to put your quarterback, your players in the best positions, to make them comfortable in the pocket. It's on execution as well. It's on the offensive line to protect for their quarterback and make sure. And finally, it's on Lamar Jackson to make the right decisions, the right reason to just be smart with the football. And so far, none of it has been happening. The Ravens have had to put together late game drives after struggling for most of the game. And I mean, look, John Harbaugh says, look, I'm going for 2 here because we don't have any corners, but he probably said I'm going for 2 here because if we don't get the ball in overtime first with the lack of corners we have, we all know what's coming. So, the Ravens offense has to pick up the slack of the defense because the defense has been playing lights out for the most part, but they can't play lights out for 60 minutes every single game. The defense can't win every single game. Lamar Jackson has to do what Lamar Jackson can do. We know he can do. We know he's a great quarterback. We know he can do so many things well, but at the same time, he is definitely going through a slump, and I think that he does need to fix it, and he needs to fix it fast because if he doesn't, this team goes as far as number 8 takes him, and if he doesn't fix it, they're not going very far, unfortunately. We'll head into our final break, though. When we get back, we'll be diving into our final batch of mailbag questions, so stay tuned for that, and we'll be right back. This holiday season, you can get the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. You can get the best of both worlds, delicious and healthy with a Built Bar. There are so many flavors I'll have a hard time choosing. We have raspberry mint brownie, cherry double chocolate, cookies and cream, or peanut butter brownie. Built Bar gives you that extra fuel you need to bust down those mold doors and battle all the holiday shoppers. People are so passionate about their favorite flavors, so tell Santa to throw a few Built Bars in those stockings. You can dip your Built Bar into a piping hot cup of cocoa, let it melt a little and give your beverage a bit of that Built Bar flavor. If you like some of those marshmallow treats around the holidays, you need to get your hands on Built Bar Puffs. They're light, fluffy, and marshmallow through and through. So go to Built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off of your order. We return here, our final segment of this Locked On Ravens episode here on Wednesday. Kevin Ostreicher, your host, still here with you. And let's dive into our final batch of mailbag questions. And we'll start off with another question from Ryan, who says, how many times do we see the same stuff every week, every season until Steve does something about it? And, I think with the Ravens, this is such a fluid team right now with the injuries. You can kind of chalk it up and say, hey, look, you're going through injuries. This is a lost season. Even though we're 8-4, we're doing a ton of great things. But we have seen sometimes, especially over the last couple of years, particularly with the offense, we'll start there, sometimes the pass game isn't consistent. You see some of the play calls from Greg Roman. They're just like, what in the world is happening right now? Like, why are you running on 2nd and 17? Right? What are you doing? You have some of the just in-game adjustments that aren't there, just game awareness that's not there. On defense, you have a team that's very high pressure, low sack. Sometimes the blitzes can get out of control. But I think the reason why is because the Ravens, John Harbaugh, Eric DeCosta, Steve Bisciotti, they all have an idea of what they want out of their team. They don't necessarily have to say, look, every year, if you're not doing your job, you're done, you're fired. But after a certain point, you got to say, all right, what are we doing? Are we just staying in place? Are we going to do this again next year? Or what are we doing? So I think what I preached on the show is growth. Being a team that grows every season is really important to me. And this team has grown every year in terms of playoffs. Literally, 2018, they lose in the wild card round. 2019, they lose in the divisional round. 2019, they win a playoff game, but lose in the divisional round. And then you have, obviously, this year, which hopefully they're able to get some stuff done. But with the injuries, what can you do? So they could just chalk it up and say, hey, this is a lost season. But some changes of some sort do have to happen in the offseason. This team has to get better. If they stay stagnant, stay complacent, they're not going anywhere. And they know that. So I trust Eric DeCosta. I believe in Steve Bisciotti. I trust John Harbaugh too. But, we'll see what happens with the coordinators. We'll see what happens with the personnel. It should be a very interesting offseason for the Ravens team, all things considered. But, yeah, I do think that something, may change, whether it's small, whether it's big, over the next couple of months for sure. Our next question here comes from Gridiron Gaming, and he asks, how high of an expectation can we realistically place on Westry and Averett to hold down the back end of this defense? We have Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, and OBJ left on the schedule, not to mention Deontay Johnson, who just burned us. Xavier Howard would sure be nice right now. And yes, Xavier Howard would certainly be nice right now, but I think the Dolphins wanted a 1 for him. I'm not giving up a 1 for Xavier Howard. I don't think that's valuable when the Ravens need picks this year in the draft, considering guys who are leaving. But, it's going to be tough because you're missing your 2 all-pro corners. Jimmy Smith is hurt a lot. You're relying on guys who have shown flashes, but Chris Westry is so inexperienced. Anthony Averett is working as a number 1 corner for the first time in his NFL career. This is a time where the Ravens need wins. They can't experiment with young guys and say, "Hey, look, let's get some experience under your belt." No, they need to win. So this is not an opportune time, especially with the guys mentioned there: Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, or Odell Beckham Jr. You got Jamar Chase on the schedule. You got Jarvis Landry, all those guys on the schedule. You got Deontay Johnson on the schedule again. So yeah, it's going to be tough. You got to place as much trust as you can in them, though. Those are the guys you're working with. There aren't going to be any better options on the free agent market this year, at least not this time of year. Guys are already signed. Guys are already finding homes. So, it's going to be tough. The pass offense wasn't great, even with Humphrey in the fold. Now Humphrey's gone. You wish you had him. But, it's going to take a drop-off. It's going to be a drop-off, I'm pretty sure. But you got to go with what you're working with. It's next man up. I'm not necessarily overconfident in these guys, but you got to place your confidence somewhere in the secondary. It seems like Chuck Clark is the guy, Anthony Averett's the guy, Tavon Young are the guy, Jimmy Smith, who, you got to say, hey, look, this is your time. Let's step up. Let's do your thing, and let's get some wins. So I hope it can be a bit better than what we've seen over the past couple of weeks and even, the whole season for the Ravens pass offense, even though they're down 2 all-pros. Our next question here comes from MLB Solidarity, who asks, what changes do the Ravens need to do to supplement Lamar Jackson with the passing game? And I mean, with all these things, with the blitzing, you have to adjust. And I know cover zero is the big issue right now. Are you sliding protections? Are you bringing more guys in line to block? Are you putting a running back in pass protection to come up with the free blitzer? Right? You got to get Lamar Jackson in better situations, But part of it is on him to read his hot reads, read the field more, progress a little bit faster, understand when to throw the ball away, understand when to make a play happen. It's all those different things for him, but you got to put him in better situations. You got to read, all right, look, this team is blitzing us on 45% of Lamar Jackson's dropbacks. Let's give him an extra blocker, or let's give him a bit more time here. Let's double team their best player to make sure that he can't get free because a guy's struggling one-on-one. Those are the types of things you have to do in these situations. And it kind of leads into our next question here from Eddie Peters Jr., who asks, why is Greg Roman abysmal at using the talent he has on offense? And what's the deal with us not being able to beat cover zero? Yeah, another Greg Roman question, very hot topic for sure over these last couple of seasons. Yeah, I mean, Roman's definitely struggled at times. He's also orchestrated and constructed one of the better rushing offenses in NFL history, but it's kind of been the opposite this year where the pass offense has been there. The rush game is not. And then the past month has been neither. Neither has been there. So again, adjusting, execution, all those things we've talked about in the show really need to get better, not just by Roman, but by the players as well. It's not all execution. It's not all just play calling for sure. And then cover zero. So with blitzing, with cover zero and whatever it is, a blitz, guys take the inside players. You let the outside guy go free. You're supposed to take as an offensive lineman the guy closest to the football. So if a safety is coming off the edge or a corner's coming off the edge, you leave that guy. You let him run free. While if there's a running back in pass protection, that guy picks up the free blitzer or something like that. Well, it seems like the Ravens right now are just not having enough protection. They're not chipping as much. You got to find some ways to just keep Lamar Jackson calm and collected in that pocket because, I mean, what we saw was a guy who earlier in the year was just playing such great football, and now we've seen the struggles in just how he's been able to adjust. It hasn't been there. So being able to say, yeah, look, teams are going to blitz us until we figure out that they need to do something about it. And so that's what they're saying to themselves right now. The Ravens are saying that. So what do they need to do? They need to adjust. They need to figure it out. Greg Roman needs to show he has the adjustments in place to do it because I just haven't seen it so far over this past month. And finally, our last question here from Fern Gully 441. Why does Lamar suck? All right. Well, I can tell you he doesn't suck. He's been bad over the past month, but he definitely does not suck. And the reason that Lamar Jackson has struggled has been a multitude of reasons. You can chalk it up to this, that, and the other. At the end of the day, there are no excuses. You got to play football. You got to do what we know that you can do. But here's something that I'm kind of putting out as a theory, and this is in no way confirmed. Don't quote me on this or anything. But I think Lamar Jackson is kind of scarred from the lack of protection this season, where he's getting antsy in the pocket. He understands that his protection is not what it was in 2019, let's say. And that is causing him to panic in the pocket, to try to play hero ball. And look, he can do it. He can play hero ball, but it's not always in the best interest to play hero ball, especially when it results in negative plays and turnovers. I understand what a player he is. A lot of people understand what a player he is, but I think he is really, really struggling for the most part because he's just getting pressured every single play. We see him running backwards like 0.5 seconds into a play. It's been bad this year. And we saw earlier in the year when the protection was better, a little better, that he was up there. He was standing in the pocket, firing over top, as Spencer Schultz, friend of the show, talked about yesterday. But it just hasn't been that way over the past month, and it's really hurting him, especially when the Ravens don't have a run game where he can't feed off of that, because the run game, who is it? It's him. He's the run game. He's also the pass game. So he's tasked with doing everything, but he can't do it as well as he likes because he has a defender in his face every 0.5 seconds. So that's where my theory is. He's not bad. He's in a slump. He's definitely in a slump. He's played poorly. He's absolutely played poorly. But, he doesn't suck. He's a player who I think is going to respond. I think he'll play a bit better, but he can only work with the players he can work with. He can only execute how he can execute. He does have to execute better. He has to play better. But I do think everybody knows the player he is at the end of the day. That's all I have for you here today, though, on Locked on Ravens. We'll take a break here. When we get back tomorrow, we'll be diving into Crossover Thursday with Locked on Browns. So stay tuned for that, and I will see you tomorrow.